Hello and welcome to Indy Talks, the monthly interview show brought to you by the Hudson Independent, the most trusted source of news in the Rivertowns. My guests today are Nick Campbell and Michelle Adams, the president and vice president, respectively, of the Rivertowns Chamber of Commerce, an organization that covers more than one town, which is unusual. They cover the villages of Irvington, Dobbs Ferry, Hastings, and Ardsley. I'm going to ask you both, and I'll start with Nick, just because you're the president. Nick, just tell a little bit about the history of the chamber. It's relatively new. How old is it? How did it start?
Hi, Barrett. So thank you for having us on here today. It's a great opportunity. So the chamber actually grew out of the Dobbs Ferry Chamber of Commerce about 5 years ago. So in the four villages we encompass between Dobbs Ferry, Irvington, Ardsley, and Hastings, each of them had their respective small chambers that had all kind of fallen by the wayside. So Maggie Segrich, amongst a few others, about 5 years ago, decided they were going to rebirth the Dobbs Chamber. Maggie ran the show for about 3 years and ended up moving to Texas. And when she did, Michelle and I came in and took over the reins. And at that point, we officially brought in Irvington, Ardsley, and Hastings, and changed the name to the Rivertowns Chamber of Commerce.
Right. And how many members do you have, Michelle, right now?
We have around 100 members.
You've got a particular style, I noticed, the way you have your meetings. You seem to have a younger group. So how did you go about recruiting members for this new multi-village chamber?
So when Nick and I took over, me being in the restaurant business, I really wanted to make the meetings something enjoyable, not just, all business. Our members are people that own their own businesses, and they're very busy. They're working a lot of times every day of the week. So I wanted this to really be a destination for them. I wanted them to, justify taking the time out of their day to come here, to come to our meetings, and to be able to speak to other, business owners in the Rivertowns.
Mm-hmm. I should back up. You reminded me that I didn't identify what you two do other than run a Chamber of Commerce. Nick has his own insurance business that's based in Irvington, but I assume your area covers a much broader sweep of that. Michelle is a restaurateur. You may well know St. George in Hastings on Hudson, and also Harper's and Dobbs Ferry. And you have an additional business. Is that right, Michelle, beyond that?
Yeah, we have a tortilleria in Yonkers called La Milpa de Rosa, and we wholesale traditional nixtamalization, nixtamal products. So it's nixtamalization of corn. It makes for a very soft, flavorful tortilla. We sell masa, chips, and we sell to a lot of, local shops and restaurants in the area.
Mm-hmm. Right. One of the main things I'd like to talk about today is the impact that the pandemic and the subsequent shutdown of businesses throughout the area, throughout the state, has had on our Rivertown communities. Let's start with your own businesses. What has happened, Nick, to the insurance business? I suspect it's probably not as hard hit as Michelle's business, but what's happened there?
So it's funny you bring that up. I sit on the local Westchester board of the Big I, which is the independent insurance agents of New York. And we've really been pushing for the past 2 years or so with the particular board that I'm on. You have to kind of move into a technology age, and the days of doing things in the office and on paper and all that is going by the wayside. And if you don't, you're kind of doomed to fail. So I've already been doing all of the Zoom and the Skype and most of the stuff, over FaceTime, by phone, really since I opened up 3 years ago. So this model is kind of now what the insurance world has moved to. I personally think it's made things move a lot quicker. So underwriting has actually been turned around a lot faster. You don't have to have, when you're doing life insurance type stuff, you don't really have to have someone going into your home to do parameds anymore. They can pull your medical records. Same thing, with auto and home insurance. A lot of it is just done with pulling records from motor vehicle, or, taking file photos offline or Zillow. or, even from the town's field cards of the home. So,
Mhm.
so as far as insurance wise goes, I actually think it sped the process up, believe it or not. The one big thing that I know I've been dealing with myself and a lot of smaller family agencies are dealing with is our kids are all home.
Yeah.
So we're working from home, we're playing mom and dad, we're playing school teacher, and I know that's kind of runs the gamut across all industries, but when, like Lee said earlier, when you want to do a call like this, if the baby's crying, you're moving outside.
Right. Understood. And that is a universal problem. Michelle, your business is much more visible in terms of the impact of it. Tell us, there must have been some pretty low moments back there in March and April when there was just nothing happening and you didn't know how long it was going to go.
Yeah, the restaurant business is unique, I think, to other small businesses because it takes so much labor to make a meal, to deliver a meal, to take orders. We our costs are divided into thirds. So, it's our fixed costs, our cost of goods, our labor, um, and it's a very week to week business. It's a cash in, cash out. So for the industry to come to a halt like it did, it's not as easy just to kind of open up and all the merchandise is there and we can sell it. So it's varied for the type of restaurants. I sit on the board for the Westchester Restaurant Association chapter, and places that were typically doing a lot of takeout business before pivoted well and are still doing a lot of takeout. What we're seeing is trends. It's hastening trends that were coming about before, like technology. And a lot of places have been able to do online ordering and pivot to that to try to up their takeout business, but it costs come with that. So it's been a lot of us kind of, doing a dance and figuring out what works and what doesn't. One of the things we did in the beginning too is we recognized that because we employ so many people, a lot of people were going to be in need very quickly. These are hourly employees. Unemployment was crumbling. So we, as a way to kind of supplement our takeout business, we started a fundraiser where we could still make meals, but then we would give those meals away to local food organizations. So
On the line, name of that organization?
Yeah, on the line. I know a lot of places also did that for hospitals. We specifically focused on food pantries or working with local municipalities to set up some drive-through distributions to get meals to people. So it, was very much just doing kind of like a big wedding, but takeout is basically kind of the way that I summarize it. It was a combination of things that we had done before, but because we're used to volume, we were able to kind of, put things in motion quickly and figure out a system.
Right. One of the things that my wife and I do when we go out, which is to say usually going out and get takeout until very recently, we would make sure to give probably double the tip that we would have normally given, just because we know that the people who are serving are no longer have that source of revenue. How have your wait staff fared in all this?
We are basically kind of beholden to what they're comfortable with. So if someone is more comfortable being at home with unemployment, then that's a decision that they've made. The thing that, in the beginning, what we did, it was a lot of us there taking orders because people felt uncomfortable to come to work. As it went on, we had a couple more people that were comfortable coming in and wanting to do orders. The PPP, has thrown a little bit of a wrench in things. It's been kind of tricky to navigate, not as far as getting people to come back, but to, figure out how to sustain those funds for as long a period of time, because we as a restaurant industry recognize that it's going to be probably at least a year, if not more, before we start seeing full dining rooms again. And so we're just trying to essentially figure out how to, get from one week to the next and make sure that we're, bringing people in and employing people that want to work, and figuring out how to give enough hours to them, to sustain them until we get through this.
Right. Well, let's broaden this discussion because you represent a whole range of businesses, mostly small businesses here in the Rivertowns. Who's done okay? Who's done very poorly in the range of those businesses? Nick?
So do you want me to handle that one?
Yeah.
So, and I should go back to something I forgot to mention rather, with what I was saying with the insurance industry before. Like I said, processes might have been sped up, but we've noticed as far as, like I know personally with myself and smaller agencies, new business has been pretty much flat. So it's been a lot of service work. Like in the beginning, we had a lot of questions for business interruption. Is it covered by a pandemic, right? Then now with the PPP stuff, hey, what do I do to fill out my PPP loans? Or, now we're finding that it's more of, I need to start saving some money. Can you rerun these quotes for us? So along the same lines of what have other businesses been going through, they've all been similar as far as stagnation goes, or we've even lost a few, which I hate to say, but we've had 2 restaurants that have been staples in both Dobbs Ferry and Hastings for the past 25 years that decided to close their doors.
Permanent.
They're just not coming back from it.
Wow.
And to me, our membership, I would say, is probably 40% brick and mortar, between the restaurants or the agency professional service type things like myself. But we're 60%, folks are selling stuff online. They're making stuff in their homes or selling it on Etsy, whatever it may be. Or they might be taking it out to a farmer's market and doing a table set up there. So, the online factor is great. I've had some people actually tell me their Amazon sales account has been booming, but they can't go and do what they normally would be doing, at the Tash or at the Irvington Farmers Market or the Hastings Farmers Market. So in that sense, people are definitely even or down.
Yeah. Go ahead, Michelle.
I just want to say, as far as to touch on the brick and mortar businesses, we're still very much in the beginning of this. And I think a lot of people are giving it a go as best they can. And as this progresses, if there's another shutdown, it's going to be even harder for people to come out of it. And it's all very much a factor of their individual situation. It depends on how helpful their municipality is being. It depends on their relationship with their landlord and how flexible their landlord is.
Rent would be a big issue for a lot of people. Have you been able, as an organization, to intervene in that or do some sort of something to help out people who are under pressure to pay their rent and about to be foreclosed on?
Michelle, I know you've been working on that more so than I have.
We haven't, I don't think we've encountered any of those situations yet. Mm-hmm. I will say that both with the Chamber and with the Restaurant Association, the call that we have with the Restaurant Association weekly is very helpful. And we had one with the Chamber so far where we can just speak, business owner to business owner and kind of bounce ideas off of each other, talk about the challenges, and offer up ideas to people who are on kind of the same level as us, as how to navigate stuff that's happening. It's reassuring to know that a lot of other, restaurateurs are already trying to renegotiate their leases and get their rent down. Even in the city, we're seeing a lot of city restaurants who, and celebrity chefs, even like Gabrielle Hamilton, reading her piece in the New York Times, it was illuminating to see that, it's not just us where we are, it's the entire industry. Everybody is having the same issues. It gives us, I think, a position of strength when we're trying to negotiate and find our way through it.
Right. Are there local resources, financial resources that you can point your memberships toward? Have in mind specifically Sunnyside Bank in Irvington, which we did a story on recently, talking about the number of loans that they were able to give out that local business owners were unable to get from the big banks. Has that been your experience?
For us, yes, we worked with, our accountant referred us to someone who's essentially a SBA broker. He works on a lot of SBA loans, and he was essential in finding smaller banks for us to apply to the loan. So we kind of were approved in one of our restaurants in one of those initial rounds because of that. I will say also, not just banks, but the county and SCORE Westchester, really, if you get on their email list, they send out a lot of notifications of free seminars. SCORE, before this, had free mentorship opportunities where they had people who were kind of retired from certain industries that you could talk to. I think they might, still be offering that via Zoom, but those are some good free resources that small businesses can use.
And Sherry at the county's office and, County Executive Latimer have been great with disseminating information. But there's also grants. So you have these other organizations that are giving grants to different local small businesses that maybe couldn't get PPP funds initially, or, couldn't get them at all if they were sole prop, or, they were a cash business more so than someone that could provide a W-2. So there definitely have been a lot of opportunities. We actually had a member early on who put together an extensive list, and we've been kind of going off that. If anybody has any questions with all the local banks that were making loans and they weren't, and they were back to making loans. So it's been a great thing to see the community come together around this whole thing.
So you mentioned the grant opportunities. What are some sources for grants that are still out there?
I know that the SBA, the EIDL loan, reopened. That overlaps a little bit with the PPP and how you can use the funds. But if you didn't get a PPP, it's a good opportunity because a portion of it is a grant and the other portion is a low interest loan. New York State, I forget the name of it off the top of my head, but New York State launched a loan program that was meant to help those who didn't get a PPP. And I think that is still running. So, I would say New York State or the SBA EIDL loan are the two that people should look into if they're looking for funding currently.
A lot of people are talking about when we get back to quote unquote normal, and other people will say there ain't going to be no normal again. It's going to be a new normal. So what do you see? Are there some lessons learned about how businesses operate and how they're likely to change on a permanent basis once this virus is behind us?
Do you want to speak?
Go ahead, Nick. I'm talking a lot.
I think the social interaction that we would have on a daily basis, where you go to somebody's office and you sit down, or you go to a restaurant and you're sitting one person next to the other, I think for right now is not going to be the case. I think you're going to see a lot more partitions in restaurants. I think you're going to see a lot more outdoor dining. I'm on the county executive's reopening committee, and I've been coming back with information to Michelle and our board and saying, what do you think about this? What do you think about that? And they've been giving me a lot of great ideas. But something that Michelle has been passionate about and that we've been kind of working towards is what we're going to do in the villages. So if you want to go out to dinner, Barrett, like you said, how do you socially distance and sit outside, but have enough rooms, have enough tabletops for everybody, right?
Right.
So a lot of the villages are looking into doing is getting these things called parklets, which essentially are partitions that they can put in the parking spots to allow more tables for dining. So coordinating that with the county has been a pretty fun endeavor, I would say. We have a call on it tonight with the Dallas Board of Trustees to see how we're going to move forward with that. But
presumably, you're not going to be able to do that much outdoor dining in December and January. So
no, and that's
some limits.
So that's the biggest question, right? Do you close the street down one day a week and allow the restaurant to have essentially 3 good hours. What happens if it rains? What happens when it gets cold out? So
Right.
we're trying to figure out the best possible way to make all this stuff work.
Mm-hmm.
It's very much, it's very much for us, we expect this to go on a long time, but we're going to do what we can when we can right now and try to maximize, our cushion for getting through this. I will say that for us, the new normal, and I think maybe a lot of businesses, is it's illuminated what's important to us, and the restaurant industry in particular. If there have been a lot of articles written and a lot of prominent restaurateurs speaking up about how the business model is broken, and if we want to see restaurants that are prioritizing fair wages and local supply chains, we have to be careful not to get too technology heavy or to we have to prioritize the people in this, but the business model has to work for that to happen. So that's been our kind of mission, is remember that we employ a lot of people that are your neighbors. And when we say that we need something to stay in business, we really need it. There is no CEO. It's our family. We have small children like you. So it's just a matter of the new normal for us is prioritizing more what's important and less of just kind of jumping from one thing to the next.
And like Michelle said earlier, if we don't do something now, if a second wave does hit, it could be extremely detrimental to the entire community if half these businesses go out of business from not being able to come back from a second wave. So the more we can do now, the more planning we can do now, the better off we'll be, in October, November time.
Right. Nick, you mentioned earlier how the community has come together during this period. Can you think of some specific ways or some anecdotes that represent that coming together?
Well, I mean, 2 things immediately come to mind. So a good friend of mine that I grew up with is actually a PA at one of the hospitals in the city. And just every night in New York, and I know it kind of carried into Westchester a little bit and into Long Island, where people would celebrate at 7 o'clock just to thank the first responders. I mean, to me, that's huge. My mom's a nurse, so I grew up in a family where she was on call all the time, and I know what that does. So not only having that as your normalcy, having to then go into an area where you don't know who's coming in, who's affected. I think it's great that the community stood up and did that for everybody. The second thing, and not to put Michelle on the spot, I think what they're doing with On the Line, with delivering food to those in need, to the families that couldn't get it for their kids because the schools are shut down. I mean, that I think speaks volumes about you're not just a restaurant there to make money. You're there to help out. You're there to give back to the community. So.
Right. One can only hope that this spirit that's come out of this will outlast the pandemic, and that will become a part of our new normal. I'm a little skeptical about that, just because people do have a tendency to kind of revert to the old ways, and you see it going on in some places outside of New York where they arbitrarily went to full steam before it was probably prudent to do so. And I'm not sure if all those good lessons are going to be learned. Do you have any feelings yourselves?
I agree with you. But I do think positive things will still come out of it. And before this, we would throw around in the restaurant industry, starting a nonprofit, and in other parts of the country, there were nonprofits started to help with mental health or help restaurant families that fell on hard times. We're an industry where a lot of people don't have health insurance. So we're actually working to incorporate On the Line as a non-for-profit, and intend to, after this, continue it as a support system for the restaurant industry, for the workers, for the families that have restaurants.
I think, Barrett, I think you're going to see a lot of change just in how things operate in general. If this PPP loan fiasco has taught us anything, it's that the American banking system is broken, right? You have the folks that really needed the money, couldn't get access to it, because the folks that didn't need it were applying for it because the parameters weren't set properly.
Right.
And, you know, the people that did get it maybe might have been able to get it before, but they were no credit worthy. There's no credit worthy difference from the point of the pandemic to before the pandemic. And if anything, the credit worthiness is worse after the pandemic. So I think they need to look at that model and really, you know, kind of flip that around and say, someone wants to start a small business, we should promote that versus, you know, being a detriment to it.
Right, right. I think everybody would agree that the federal government has been kind of non-functional throughout this, or at least dysfunctional. But from what I hear you folks saying, the local governments get pretty high marks. Would you extend that beyond the villages and the county to the state, or not?
I mean, I personally think I think the governor did a great job with how they did everything in New York. I think the information that was coming from the governor's office was being disseminated well, and then being passed along to the county executives and, you know, to the local authorities. But I think a lot of it is with, you know, all your social media and everything. Everyone is so entwined now that a lot of business owners were actually on top of things before we even got some information in regards to, you know, PPP or PPE or anything like that. So
Right.
I think it's just staying engaged is really one of the biggest pieces for the small business community.
Are there some new hybrid models out there? I think of people who run fitness centers or yoga or exercise classes, maybe adopting more online services to supplement their core business. Do you see that happening, and do you see that remaining in place?
I think Becca from Dobbs Ferry mentioned that on our call. Yeah, that may, some of the online stuff may stick. And I think that, you know, same with retail, that's where we were moving before this. And so it's kind of sped up that process. You know, as someone who has businesses that really rely on having people in their space, you know, I hope it doesn't shut out too much of that person-to-person interaction. But I think that we will see a lot more online since, you know, after this.
Right. I had an experience. I went out and bought a bicycle because of this thing, just because I wanted to get around a little bit more and get some more exercise than I was getting. And I needed something done with it. And I took it down to Endless Trails in Dobbs Ferry, the bike shop, and learned that they are just doing gangbusters business since this has started, because lots of people like me were, you know, reverting to bikes, and they were so backed up that they, you know, had more business than they could ever do. Are there other examples you can think of that, other than your own, Nick, which seems to have done pretty well? But other businesses that sort of counterintuitively have, I wouldn't say thrived out of this, but certainly survived.
I mean, I can tell you that Dr. Gupta's pediatric practice done very well. And he, you know, he's been kind of ahead of the curve for a while on this, doing the Zoom calls and whatnot. But if my sister-in-law does medical billing, and she said that a lot of the medical billing has gone down because people aren't going into the doctor's office. They're just doing more of the Zoom call type stuff. So
has been a guest on this show in the past, and he does house visits, which in this day and age is gangbuster business.
He's doing very well. So
I think
he's a little tired. He needs a rest. He's running around like crazy.
True. I think we're coming near the end of our time here. I really appreciate the two of you taking the time to, you didn't have to go anywhere for this interview, but at least you were able to log on. I appreciate that. And I wish you well in the future.
Thank you very much. Same to you.
Thank you, Aaron.